From the very moment Brad Treliving was hired in Toronto, the thought process behind it was, well, he's going to do something different. He's going to make bigger trades. He's going to sign different players. And yet we all sat here wondering, what could those be and what kind of impact might Brendan Shanahan have on this? Was this truly the Shanahan plan? Was this all that Kyle Dubas loved these smaller skilled players? Is there going to be something different that goes on going into next season? And the first test of all of this was free agency. And through the first 2 days, Mr. Treliving not only had one, but 4 signings. Breaking all of these signings down, what do they mean? How do they affect the team? What's the cap situation? And do we like these signings? What's up, Leafs fans, and welcome back to Leafs Digest. Yes, it has been a little while since we put out a video. A lot of these came mostly through the end of the season when we were looking at what went down with Leafs management, how they were going to handle things moving forward, what might they do during this offseason, and then I obviously put out a free agent player that I was looking at and thought, hey, we've got to go out and get this guy, as well as some rumors of some names that were being kicked around that might be tied to the Maple Leafs. But with a couple more signings coming in, and as I expect a whole lot more to be coming down with this Leafs team, whether it be news, rumors, or actual signings and trades that go on, it'll all be broken down here on this channel. So if you enjoy the content here today, please make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications here on this channel so you get notified every time we go live or new videos come out. I'm also interested to hear your thoughts about everything that went down, so please make sure to let me know in the comments throughout the course of this video once this video ends. Also, if you want to ask me to break something down, you have questions about something, you want to know my thoughts on it, you can let me know in the comment section as well, and I can make videos about those going forward in the future. But a few different things we want to get to here today. Obviously, we're going to get into the free agent signings. We'll get into it just a little bit, more of a brief overview and some thoughts. Throughout the course of this week, I'm going to do grade breakdowns of each of the signings, my thoughts on how those work money-wise, player-wise, fit-wise, and each individual guy, and go a little bit more in-depth on each of those. But for the sake of today, just kind of recap everything that went on. So we will start here with the Leafs signings. The Leafs signings reactions and how they kind of went, at least from a general perspective, and a little bit more into the little more details of the things that went on. We'll get into the cap situation after, then we'll get into what Treliving might have to do next. So starting here with the Leafs signings from free agent day. Well, I mean, look, day one did not go necessarily how I expected. I was not necessarily upset with the signings that went on, but more so in disbelief of the signings that didn't happen. Now, that would be the signing, first and foremost, of Ryan O'Reilly. That one was the most upsetting one when you look at the fact that this was not about term, this was not about money. He did not want to come back because he just did not want to play for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Now, there's a lot of theories out there that this was about the players in the locker room, the coach, just the media, the city itself, like having to play here in this fishbowl in the home market. There's a lot more pressure on him. I think he obviously loves Toronto, but just the fact of actually having to play here is a whole different animal, especially for a guy of that magnitude who's going to be put on the hot seat like that and be the guy. It's a whole lot more of a different situation for him, but that one stung the most. And I sat here and I kept looking at it and I said, this is where I said, these are the problems the Leafs had. If you watched the Leafs Digest channel, you would have seen me say the biggest mistake they were making was bringing back Keefe and all of the core four. To bring back all of that just felt like the definition of insanity, right? We're doing the same thing over and over and over again, and you're expecting a different result. And if him leaving had to do with the fact that those 4 guys were staying and Keefe was being here, it just kind of felt like it was a reinsuring thing to the thoughts and the feelings that we had going into this offseason, where we kind of sat here and said, all right, if you're not going to move on from the 4, which is probably the hardest thing to do, moving on from Keefe might be the next natural step. Now, you don't want to give the players the out and say, hey, it wasn't your fault, it's the coach. But at the same time, maybe you just need a different voice above those guys now. Maybe you need someone who's a little bit harder, maybe not Mike Babcock type of break you down, wear you out, tire you out kind of coach, but a guy who could come in there and be a little bit more forceful in the tactics, someone who's not going to have to go out and walk their comments back after they call out the team or whatever it is. They don't do that, and then you see this guy walk, and it feels like, hey, you know what? Maybe we are right that these group of 5 guys should not all be back here. That's Keefe, Tavares, Nylander, Matthews, and Marner. But who knows? These are just rumors. Maybe it was just, hey, I don't like the media. I don't like having to deal with this. Let me go to Nashville. I like singing. I like guitar. I like the music. I like the city. Who knows? Maybe that was just what he was more interested in. It's very possible. But as far as the actual signings go, day one, I think O'Reilly leaving combined with these two signings of Klingberg and Reaves made people feel a whole lot worse about the situation. You look at Ryan Reaves, 3 years by $1.3 million. It's obviously not the ideal signing when you watch Ryan O'Reilly go and walk away. You watch some of the other signings come up and you see their dollar values. One thing I want to remind people on the Reaves one here, don't compare it to Blake Wheeler. I get it. I understand. But don't compare it to that contract. When you look at a guy who's going to sit there and get just under $1 million in Blake Wheeler, whatever it is on his deal, he did just get moved on from by the Winnipeg Jets. They're trying to get out of a huge cap hit. He's still getting paid that money by them. So he's making that money. He might have just looked at this. We have no idea, pure speculation here, but there's a very good chance he might have just looked at this and said, hey, I've got an opportunity to go here. I'm already making a boatload of money. I'm not going to sign some huge contract. And he sees a better fit personally with the Rangers. Who knows? Maybe Treliving called on him and then they just didn't want to come to Toronto. It's entirely possible. With this Reaves one, there's one thing I want to point out to people, and I will get into it more when we talk about the actual grades of the signing later in different videos throughout the course of this week. The one thing I think is really important, and I think people undervalue it, especially when you look at Corsi and charts and all this stuff, the guy loves being in the locker room and being around teammates. And this seems like the type of guy to me who is not going to allow David Kampf and Austin Matthews to eat separately at dinner. I'm not saying they did before, but more so just as a hypothetical, if there's different groups of guys who go out together on a nightly basis, he's the kind of guy that you get the impression from, he's not letting that happen. You're going out for dinner, you're going out as a team. And there's something to that because when you get to when it matters most, when you get to the playoffs, maybe it's not necessarily that the guys in the bottom six are sitting there going, hey, we got to play for those big boys. But maybe it flips around and then you're sitting there where the top guys are like, hey, we can't let those guys down. They're not expected to score the goals. We are. So now we're going to put it on ourselves to go out and get this job done for them. There's something into that. Maybe 1.3 is a little bit much on the money side, but the actual personality I do like. And I see people online talking about, oh, well, he's not going to be out there to intimidate because he's not playing on Matthews' line and he's not going to play the number one line. No, he's not. But what he's going to do is if someone does anything, he's going to end up in some type of situation. I would hope Sheldon Keefe would at least run it like this, where he can go out there and run somebody through the glass. We saw him do it with Minnesota. We saw him do it with Vegas. We saw him do it with the Rangers. It's not necessarily a preventative measure as much as it is a reactionary measure where the guy can go out there and stand up for people after the fact, whereas no one really did that before other than Luke Shen when he came here, and he obviously moved on for way too much money than the Leafs should be paying him. Cheers to Luke Shen. Kudos to you. 2.75. Brilliant deal by you and your agent. But I don't think the Leafs should have paid him that. So who's the next guy to come in here and do that? Well, it's going to be Ryan Reaves. Is he going to play 82 games? Probably not. But you can put him in the lineup when you need to against some of the bigger, tougher teams. John Klingberg, obviously the second signing this day. Look, I saw a lot of backlash to it. I'll be very honest about my opinion on it. I got no problem with Klingberg at 1 year by $4.15 million. He is a highly offensive, talented player who could go on the first power play and run that. As long as he's deployed that way, I think we will be fine. You match him up with a guy who can play well defensively alongside of him and not sit here and go, hey, you're going to be Morgan Rielly's D partner, which would be a mind-blowingly obvious bad move to do, considering how poor they both are defensively, but put him with a guy who's defensive. Put him with Jake McCabe. Put him with TJ Brodie if he sticks around. You can put him in a spot where you have a guy to anchor him, and then he can just run and play offense, and then you can kind of get that balance, and you get a little bit spread out through your team there where you have Morgan Rielly offense, John Klingberg offense, and then you can put some defensive guys around them to kind of build it out that way. This guy, trust me, if he plays to his offensive potential, Leafs fans, we will not be sitting here going, why are we paying 4.15 on him? Now, the best part of the free agency, and I'm sure a lot of people were excited about this one, especially considering how devastated a lot of us were after the trade deadline when we didn't get him, was Tyler Bertuzzi. If you recall, a couple of weeks ago, I said the guy that the Leafs need in free agency was Tyler Bertuzzi. They need to sign Bertuzzi. I saw a lot of people going back and watching it after the fact, going and looking at that Bertuzzi signing video. That was my top target. That was the one guy I sat there and said we need. And again, if you haven't gone and watched it after this video, make sure to head on over there, check that out, because there's a more in-depth breakdown on Tyler Bertuzzi and why I thought he'd be a good fit on the Leafs. We'll get into that again, obviously. But again, while you're at it, like, subscribe, turn on notifications. Very, very easy to do. And you'll get notified every single time that these videos come out. But Tyler Bertuzzi was top of my list. I thought this is the best free agent. You can get him at good money. I kept seeing comparisons. Hey, what would his contract? What would his AAV come in at? And I compared him to Michael Bunting, and I said these are the projections for Bunting. It was between $4 to $5 million per year. Bunting was looking at 4 to 5 years. I imagine you maybe throw on another year there if he got to 5, where he signed 4 by 4.5. If he signs 5, he might want another $500,000, maybe $1 million on top of that. He doesn't. He signs the 4.45. I'm happy to take Tyler Bertuzzi at $1 more million per year, because I think that this is the type of guy who will make a strong impact in the top 6 here. Michael Bunting was a good complementary player in terms of just being a guy who kind of go out there and get things done. In Carolina, he's projected to be a third-line player. He couldn't do that here in Toronto because of the drop-off that he faced. Tyler Bertuzzi, on the other hand, is a surefire top 6 player, and if he's not playing in the top 6, he's still going to make a strong impact in the bottom 6. If he plays on that third line, they slide him in there somehow, you move guys around. Either way, if he's playing on Matthews and Marner's line or he's playing on Tavares and Nylander's line, he's a significant difference maker for this Leafs team moving forward. Crazy difference maker. The playmaking ability, the goal scoring ability, and on top of that, the tenacity. You're going to look at him and say, oh, this guy doesn't fight that much. He's more of a rat. Yeah, he is, but he battles. He wins battles. He can create space. And by the way, he's going to be playing alongside Matthews and Marner. He's not afraid to fight. No, he's not a guy who goes out there and starts stuff and just goes out there to fight the toughest guys. He's not. Let's not pretend that he is. But what he is, if someone's jabbing at Matthews, someone's jabbing at Marner, like we saw Tkachuk do in the playoffs last year, like we saw Sherratt do to Matthews a couple years ago in the playoffs, guess what? Tyler Bertuzzi, he's jumping in there and actually doing something about it, not pretending like he's going to do something about it like we saw Michael Bunting do. So for $1 more million per year, I will happily take that. That was the best signing that I could have seen. Now, the second one that comes out, Max Domi, 1 year, $3 million. There's not too much to say about this one in this right now. He seems like he's really excited to play here. I think that this is obviously some pure speculation on this, but I think he's going to come here and play his heart out because his dad played here. I don't think he's going to have as much pressure on him as maybe some people think that he will. It's not going to be David Clarkson-esque. He's getting paid $3 million. He's going to be second, maybe likely third line guy, whether he plays center or he plays wing. He's an offensive talent. He's not really defensive or defensively talented, but assume this. Put him on David Kampf's line on the third line. Put Max Domi over on the left wing side there, and David Kampf is his anchor defensively. Calle Jarnkrok is on the far side there. Now Calle Jarnkrok actually has an offensive player to play with in Max Domi who can score on the plays that Jarnkrok sets him up for. He can also set Calle Jarnkrok up on the opposite side. Whereas when Calle Jarnkrok dropped out of the top 6 before, he didn't really have that because he's playing with David Kampf and Pierre Engvall, Pontus Holmberg, and Alex Kerfoot. This is an offensive upgrade on Alex Kerfoot. Trust me, it is. It's going to work out. His explosiveness, his ability to join the play, his ability to score as soon as he enters the zone. He's going to be a nice complementary player to Calle Jarnkrok offensively. And if you can anchor him into a spot where he's got a defensive player there, like Jarnkrok is able to play, like David Kampf plays, I think you're setting yourself up with a good spot where you've got a better 1 through 9 right now. So I look at that. I think that that's good. The other thing I saw on Twitter here was this tweet from Fluke Jurgensen at Joey Ferg. He said, Leafs left wingers 2022 opener, Bunting, Malgin, Engvall. Leafs left wingers 2023 opener, Bertuzzi, Nyes, Domi. Might be a bit of an upgrade to that. I say it is. And Mr. Fluke Jurgensen, you are correct. So I think you upgrade on your left wing side there. Defense, we'll see. in terms of Ryan Reaves, you're just adding character. That's what it is. It's a guy who can come in, maybe make some changes to the locker room. And at 1.3, maybe it's a little bit expensive. Maybe we look back on it and say, why did we pay that? But for the time being, I think that might be worthwhile for the type of character he can bring to the locker room and the pressure he can take off of some of those guys by just the personality he brings in there. Bertuzzi and Domi, also the kinds of guys who can bring some character and personality to a locker room. Now, you sign a boatload of guys on your free agency or your first 2 days. What does this mean for the Leafs cap? Well, let's get into the cap situation heading into next season. First and foremost, where is this cap at right now? So I go to Cap Friendly, and this is what you look at. Projected cap hit going into next season, $92,331,450. This is obviously above the cap, as you can see there in red. You're down, you're over the cap, $8,831,450. So, well into the cap, but this obviously doesn't include Jake Muzzin. So, if you project that in where you're going with the estimates, $5.625 million on Jake Muzzin brings you back down. So, you're going to be about $3 million over the cap. What does this mean for the Leafs going forward, and what are they going to do? Well, you got to look at this. You're allowed to go above the cap by approximately just over $8 million, about 10% of the cap going into the season for about 10 days. So there's going to be a trade coming here throughout the summer. You can have that cap space above. You can use up as much as you'd like until there's a certain day that you have to be cap compliant. I believe it's 10 days before the regular season. So you can be above it then. You can start to figure some things out here. Test the market. Find out what you can get rid of, because we know there's some obvious candidates. But essentially for where the cap is currently, we are over and moves need to happen, because even a Muzzin LTIR does not get you there, as we just pulled up. You're about $4 million over still. There needs to be money moved out before day one of this season. And according to Brad Treliving, what he said to John Klingberg the other day that we saw him talk about on TSN, there's more to come here, and it's not just cap dump. I think Brad Treliving is going to be out there to try to make moves and still try to improve this team. He's not ready to go into the season with the team as it is right now. I don't think that your moves and your team is built at the trade deadline. It's what we did last year where they acquired 7 guys. I think that it is built and it is done in the offseason, and then you fix and tinker as you go along. You don't change everything about your team, and I think that's what Brad Treliving is setting up for. So, what does Brad Treliving do going into next season? What are the next moves? Well, as you look at the cap right now, currently, Jake Muzzin is not on the LTIR. That is projected to go onto the LTIR, which will obviously bring the cap down. I think that's going to be one move that happens. If that can't happen, I'm sorry, but I kind of imagine him being in a situation where he might get shipped out to Arizona. I think that that's the reality here. Nick Robertson is also currently listed on the IR on the Cap Friendly website. It's an interesting one to follow along with, because this guy has been injured for an extended period of time throughout his career. He's suffered major injuries that have held him out for long periods of time. He's never really been able to find a role with this team. So to me, I kind of look at this and think that I have a feeling Brad Treliving might see what the market is on Nick Robertson, because it's extra money that you can move out. It's a smaller player, which Brad Treliving hasn't necessarily loved throughout his time as a GM in the NHL. He obviously likes some of them, but he's also looking at this team going, we got a bunch of small-scale players. Do we need another one? Do we need another one of these guys fitting in here, especially one who's had injury issues? Maybe there's some type of return out there. I'm not saying one way or another that it's going to happen, but I feel like this is a guy who could be tested in the trade market over the next couple months leading into the season. Now here's where the bigger moves come in. Ilya Samsonov has yet to sign. He is a restricted free agent. He's yet to sign with this team. And when he does, it's going to put this team up probably another $3 to $4 million in cap, assuming that's where he comes in based on where his projections are, thanks to like Evolving Hockey and all those different websites that can give you some of these cap projections. But if he does that, now you're back to about $7.5 million, potentially $8 million over the cap yet again. So where are the moves coming from? Well, Matt Murray is still at $4.6875 for one more year. I think that this is a guy who does not get bought out. Buying him out is still going to hit you on the cap. You got to figure out a way to get rid of this. Prime candidates I look at out there, San Jose Sharks. I think they might be a team willing to take this money on. They're a team that's not going to be very good. They're still trying to dish out Erik Karlsson. You do that, That was a Norris Trophy winner on a team that was absolutely terrible and drafted in the top 5 of the NHL draft this year. They're going to still be bad. They're still going to be moving on from guys. Imagine taking a Norris Trophy winner off of that team that was god-awful. Not necessarily like they're looking to compete next season. So I think that might be a spot for them to go. You also look at James Reimer, leave San Jose. Looking for some goalies potentially. Maybe they can eat that cap for 1 year. I think that might be a possibility. I don't think Arizona is as much of a candidate anymore. They seem to be trying to sign players to actually improve their team. They're not really looking to be that cap dump kind of team anymore moving into this next coming season. I think one of those reasons has to be the fact that they can't find an arena. And if you're going to try to find an arena and want to stay in Arizona, maybe by the force of hand of Gary Bettman, but he's looking at you saying, you got to find an arena, you got to be competitive because you got to put fans in seats out there to make some money, to tell the city that, hey, you can stay around because you actually can make money. I don't think that's a good spot for him to end up, or a likely spot for him to end up. Now, you're going to look at 4.6875. That doesn't solve it still, because if you sign Samsonov, you're up again. Here's the guy I look to next. It's TJ Brodie. He's got a year remaining. I don't think he's a bad player. One thing I will say, though, he has declined. He has significantly declined over the last 2 seasons to the point where we've seen him throughout the last 2 playoffs become a liability at that point. I don't know if it's because he was being relied upon too much, where maybe in this new system he won't, but it was something very evident that we did see as Leafs fans, where there was a lot of games where we came on and even people in the chat were kind of looking at saying, hey, TJ Brodie was awful tonight. This goal was TJ Brodie's fault. This game was TJ Brodie's fault. Whatever it was, he did start to have a decline. That $5 million, that might be a little bit too steep of a price to pay for him in Brad Treliving's eyes. The other thing I want to note here, Brad Treliving moved on from TJ Brodie effectively twice. The first one was in a deal with Toronto to acquire Nazem Kadri, and at the time, Nazem Kadri said, I will not be going to Calgary via this trade. And Brad Treliving had been prepared to send out TJ Brodie the other way. And then guess what he did a year later? Well, let TJ Brodie walk as a free agent. So I think there might be a possibility for him to move on there. And the other thing I keep looking at with this defense is Brad Treliving likes to build his defense a certain way. He kept talking about how he wants to build his defense a certain way and play defensively a certain way. Blah, blah, blah. Well, guess what? He hasn't really done anything to the defense except add offensive talent, which isn't traditionally how he builds his defense. So, for me, when I look at this Brad Treliving situation, especially defensively, I think that there's more coming here, and I think that might be via a little bit of cap removal with a guy like TJ Brodie, where maybe you slide down in contracts in some other guys who you think might be able to fill in the very same role, if not a very similar role. Look maybe to, say, Carolina, where a guy like Brett Pesce is there. Do you send out 1 or 2 pieces and get back a guy like Pesce? It's very possible. When I say 1 or 2 pieces, I mean active players on the roster, not total pieces in the trade. But it's very possible because Pesce comes in here, less salary. It's less hit against your cap. He's a guy who can play a physical role, something Brad Treliving's looking for. I think that some of these moves might be coming up on the horizon, but nonetheless, Leafs fans, there's going to be trades that have to happen. And they will all be broken down here on the Leafs Digest channel. So if you enjoyed the content here today, again, final reminder, please make sure to like this video, subscribe to this channel, and turn on notifications so you get notified every single time we go live or more videos just like this one drop. As well, if you enjoyed the content, if you have thoughts about anything that happened, any signings, any trades proposed, the cap situation, please let me know in the comments below. And if you have questions going forward or you want me to cover something, I'd be happy to do so. So let me know what you'd be looking for. Just say, hey, can you talk about this? And I will get to that in the coming weeks as we get through the offseason here, because we know no games, no training camp. You kind of can go a little bit in between anything happening with this Leafs team. So let me know what you want to hear. But until then, Leafs fans, I appreciate you tuning in. Keep believing.